Graham Van Phillips, European Tour winner and PGA coach, and this video today is going to teach you guys how to smash the driver. Now, after watching this video, anyone in the world will be able to carry the ball 350 plus yards. No, obviously not. Little warning there, guys, okay? If you click onto any videos that have the words 300 plus or anything to that effect, either in the thumbnail or in the title, please don't watch the rest of that video. Okay, to carry the ball 300 plus yards requires at least about 115 miles an hour club head speed, and the likes of Rory McIlroy and Jason Day and co are well over the 120 mark. So bearing in mind that the average amateur is somewhere between sort of 85 and 100 miles an hour club head speed, what this video is all about is maximising what you've got so that you can get the most out of your driver. Okay, so let's get stuck in. Now, most of you are probably well aware that to get the most out of a driver now, there's obviously lots of information out there on the internet now. Most people know that you need to get a high launch with low spin. Okay, we call that a rainbow flight. So if you get that picture in your mind of a rainbow quite literally, and we've got that high initial launch of the golf ball, and then it's coming down pretty shallow and therefore rolling its maximum distance as well. So those two things are what we're looking to maximise. The highest possible launch really with the lowest possible spin. And what we can do in the setup is we can sort of give ourselves the best chance to achieve those two ball flight characteristics before we even start to move. So let's get stuck into the setup. Now, I'm going to set up to this ball here, and the first thing we need to do to encourage that high launch is we need to get the ball position forward in the stance. And a great tip that I like to give is we can use our forward peck, okay, the peck that's nearest to the target. If we can line up the golf ball with the center of that peck, so you want to just get a feeling that the ball is directly opposite your lead peck, okay, in the center. Okay, so in other words, in front of the sternum. Okay, so straight away from the get-go, we want to feel like that ball is positioned to the target side of the sternum, somewhere around 4 or 5 inches, and using that lead peck is a great reference point. Now, stance width, nice wide stance, a little bit wider than shoulder width I recommend, because if we're going to start generating maximum force, which I'm going to get into later on in this video, we need a nice stable base. So slightly wider than shoulder width. And weight distribution, I'd like you to feel that you just shift that weight a little bit to the rear foot, okay, the foot that's furthest from the target, because that's also going to help us to get this ascending angle into the ball. We want that driver to be coming up when it hits the golf ball. That's going to help us with that launch. It's also going to help us to reduce the spin. They're the two keys that we're looking for there. So we really want to get somewhere between 60 and 70% of our body weight set on that back foot. Now, that's key because it's going to give us a good chance to hit up on the ball. Again, later in this video I'm going to talk about weight shift and how important it is to not shift too far towards the target. I'll get into that later, but let's stick with the setup here. So ball position forward opposite that lead peck. We've got a nice wide base and we've set that weight about 60 to 70% into the rear foot. Hopefully you can see now that by doing that I've sort of set my shoulders on that slightly elevated angle, and again that's all encouraging that all-important ascending blow with the driver into the ball. Okay, so we're all setting up like Rory McIlroy now, so let's get stuck into the backswing mechanics. Now, we've got that weight already set into that rear foot, as I was saying there at the first part of this video, so we've already got the weight shifted, okay? And for that reason, I'm going to advocate that we don't really make any more of a lateral move in the backswing now, okay? We've already got 60 to 70% of that weight in that back foot. We don't need to move anymore. We can start to rotate around a pretty centered center of gravity, okay? So I'd like to talk about the word rotate a little bit, because that word gets very misinterpreted in golf instruction, and when people think of rotation, it can cause the shoulders to actually rotate on a very horizontal plane, and that can cause the backswing lines to start getting very deep. The club can start to get really, really deep behind you if those shoulders turn too horizontally. So just a word of warning here, when I say rotate, it's very important that we get a sense that the lead shoulder is actually slightly dropping underneath your chin. So the rotation is very much on the spine angle. Okay, so you can see I'm tipped forward into my address position here, and when I rotate, you can see that that lead shoulder needs to drop. Okay, the sensation is that that shoulder is going to feel like it's pivoting a little bit underneath your chin. If we think rotation sometimes, it's very easy for those shoulders to turn on too flatter planes. So just a little bit of a warning there. But backswing wise, we're really looking for a nice wide takeaway. Okay, lots of different opinions on this. Obviously, my personal opinion, looking at most of the longest hitters in the world, is they have a really nice wide one-piece takeaway. That's my preference there. So not going to move the weight laterally. We're going to stay centered. We've already got that weight 70% on that back foot. We're just going to try and pivot that lead shoulder down underneath the chin, staying centered, nice wide arc, and we just want to rotate as far as we possibly can, okay? And that's also key here, because a lot of people try and overstretch in an attempt to get distance, and all that's going to do is pull you out of position, pull you off balance. So make sure you're always turning within your range of motion, and we're going to get into the all-important transition in the next phase of this video. Okay, so we're standing to the ball fantastically. We're in a really strong address position. We've also wound up beautifully now into the backswing. We've got that weight set into the back foot. You're coiled and ready to go. Now the next phase in transition, the key move if we're going to hit the ball as far as we possibly can. Now, weight shift in the downswing, again, obviously a point of contention. There's lots of different opinions about this. I can only tell you about what I've seen playing with the best guys in the world, and obviously hours of study of those guys as well, putting in private research. But what I see is, yes, we do need to shift our weight back towards the target, but it needs to be relatively minimal, okay? Because the last thing we want to do, having got that weight nicely behind the ball with driver, we know that we want to hit up on it. The last thing we want to do now is start moving massively towards the target, certainly with the upper body, and that's going to give us more chance to then hit down on it, which is an absolute no-no with the driver if we want maximum distance. So we've got to find that balance between shifting some weight back to the target for power generation, but also staying enough behind the ball to give us that chance to actually hit up on it and create those ideal impact dynamics. So what I recommend is that the first thing we feel from the top of the swing is a combination of two things, okay? One of them is the driving forward of the rear elbow, okay? And these two things need to be done in harmony. I'm going to describe them separately so you get a nice image, but they're going to be done in harmony with each other. So point number one is we've got to feel that rear elbow driving forward. Now, I talk about this quite a lot in my anti-slice video with the driver. It's very much akin to the feeling of throwing a stone or skimming a stone across a lake. So we've really got to get that sensation. You can see here it's quite a natural throwing movement. We've got to get that lead elbow traveling towards the golf ball first, okay? The death move for power is using the shoulder and hand first in that fashion, okay? That's internal shoulder rotation. This is external, okay? Okay, they're the anatomical terms for it, but in layman terms, we just need to drive that rear elbow forward, okay? And again, a really nice analogy and picture for you guys in your mind is just imagine that you're skimming a stone, and it will happen very naturally. So point number one in transition, you've got to drive that lead elbow. Now, as that's happening, we must sense that the pelvis in particular, okay, we're going to feel like the upper body is quite stationary at this point, but as we're driving that elbow, we need to sense that the pelvis is shifting from our right side to the left side. So we need to just get a sense that we've changed our weight distribution from right to left. Now, at the moment that you feel that left side has taken your weight, okay, at the very millisecond you sense that left side's taken that weight, we've got to sense a huge rotation in that pelvis, okay? And what's going to happen in actual fact, and another great thought for you to have, is you need to imagine that your sacrum, okay, or your coccyx, somewhere near the bottom of your spine, okay, at the base of the spine, you need to sense that as soon as you've hit that left side or the side that's nearest the target, that you actually start to rotate your tailbone away from the target. Now, that can sound a bit counterintuitive because obviously we want to hit the ball in that direction, and I'm asking you to feel like you're moving away from the target. And the key to this move is the fact that once you've hit that front foot, we now need to use that force, that energy that we've basically driven into the ground there, we need to use that to spring off of and spring back and away, and that's going to enable us to still hit up on the ball but with a lot of force. Okay, so sounds complicated, it really isn't. I've broken it down there, but we can do that in one fluid motion. So as we've wound to the top here, the movement is very much like so. You can see I'm driving the pelvis and I'm simultaneously driving the elbow. So these things are happening in harmony, and you can make them one fluid movement. They don't need to be thought of as a series of separate movements. Okay, so you can rehearse it quite literally like so. So I'm driving the pelvis into the left leg, I'm driving the elbow at the same time, but as you can see here, there's almost a counter rotation going on. As I hit that front foot, I'm trying to rotate my tailbone away, and that's going to keep me behind the ball into impact. Okay, the last thing we want to do with driver is get the upper body moving forward into the shot. That's going to give us a descending angle. It's going to really cost us distance. It's going to put spin on the ball. It's going to bring the launch down, and we want high launch and low spin. So key moves in transition there. Be very aware that you're going to only shift the weight until you feel that fraction of left side dominance or target side dominance. Everything then is going to be a real rotation backwards and away from the target. Okay, so I want to go into a little bit of the physiology here, because there's a lot of talk now and there's a lot of buzzwords about pressure plates and about putting force down into the ground. Now, those things are true. We do need to use the ground. We do need to put some force down into the ground, as I was describing there, but it needs to be very momentary. Okay, now I'm going to use a little bit of complex terminology here. When we train the explosive muscles in the body, it's called plyometric training. Okay, and in order to reach that level of athleticism, to even think about doing plyometrics, it normally requires about 2 years of consistent strength training. Okay, and I'm talking about being able to squat twice your body weight before athletes are considered ready to do plyometric training. So there's a lot of pseudoscience in golf. There's a lot of guys that profess to be experts in physical training with regard to golf, and I am a qualified gym instructor, for your information, and I've made it my job to travel the world and find the very highest authorities on physical training. One of the guys that I spent a week with in America, Vladimir Zatsiorski, is considered to be the godfather of strength and conditioning. He's written many famous books, one being The Science and Practice of Strength and Conditioning, and he basically told me that lifting heavy and, you know, trying to train like an Olympic athlete for a golfer is really a waste of time. It takes 4 years of absolute specific training before people should even think about getting into plyometrics. Now, the other scientific knowledge that's important for you to know about putting forces down into the ground is that there are certain phases. When we do a jump, you know, which is what guys are telling people to do now, there's a lot of videos out there talking about squatting into the transition and then jumping up in the air. Now, there are different phases of a jump, and the phase that we go from the squat into the actual jump, that transitional phase from being down to up, is called the amortization phase. Okay, and that phase needs to be as short as possible for maximum power production. Now, a lot of golf coaches are talking about getting amateurs to feel like they're putting massive pressure down into the ground in transition. Now, the problem is most people are not Olympic athletes, okay? And if we get players starting to really sit down and squat massively in transition, they are not powerful enough to get out of that position, bearing in mind a golf swing's between 1 and 1 3/4 seconds on average. Okay, so it's not great advice to teach your average Joe, your average member of the public who's not an Olympic athlete, to start putting masses of force down into the ground, they are simply not going to get out of that position in time to hit the golf ball. So yes, we do want to feel this little shift to the left towards the target. Yes, we want to feel a little bit of ground force. Just try and feel that foot feeling a little bit of pressure into the floor, but please don't start trying to sit massively down in transition. You will not be athletic enough to get out of that position, okay? Now, if you go on YouTube and you watch Rory McIlroy, you watch Tiger Woods, yes, they've got some quite large squatting motions. Their heads drop quite considerably, but we're talking about the top 1% of golfing athletes there, okay? Obviously, genetics come into it hugely. Maybe you are a natural athlete, maybe you're somebody that's got incredible genetic potential, and you can experiment with this. You can experiment with how much down forces you can get away with, but in general, be very careful with a lot of this buzz information at the moment about squatting down in transition. We need to feel just a tiny bit of pressure in that front foot, and then we're going to use that pressure to help us spring out, but keep it as fast and as minimal as you can. Avoid masses of downforce. You will not be athletic enough to get out of that position. So the all-important transition, let's summarize. There was a lot of information there, but if you go back over this video, you will learn a lot if you just take your time to go through that information. Now, in a nutshell, we're just looking for the rear elbow to drive forward simultaneously with a little bit of weight shift, just enough to feel that weight touch that forward side, okay? As soon as you feel that weight touch that forward side, you've got a signal to start feeling that tailbone springing backwards and away, so masses of rotation, okay? If we go into lateral movement for too long, again, you're not going to be athletic enough to get out of the way. You've got to start this rotational pelvic movement with that sacrum spinning away from the target as fast as you possibly can, okay? So you've got to get any sense of weight touching that forward leg, and you know immediately that's your trigger to get that pelvis moving out of the way. So masses of pelvic rotation. Think of it as moving the tailbone away from the target, okay? A little bit counterintuitive, but that is the secret to rotational power. Okay, great. So you've got a lovely, powerful setup. You're winding nicely into the right side. You've started to feel that lovely transition move with the rear elbow. You can feel the pelvis rotating away from the target, springing off that front foot. As soon as you feel that little bit of pressure there, you're going to use that as your trigger. Now, coming through impact, again, I'm breaking this down. I'm going to teach you in a moment how to practice this stuff and be able to do it all in one fluid motion, but just breaking it down with some sensations. So basically we're coming into impact now, and some really good sensations to feel to make sure that we maximize ball speed here and we don't waste any club head speed is, I'd like you to think of the shoulder that's nearest the target, and as we're driving into that golf ball here, we can feel that tailbone springing back and out of the way. It can be really advantageous to feel that lead shoulder pulling up and back. So it's a very backward, upward thrusting motion with that lead shoulder, again, away from the target. So the shoulder's moving up and back, okay? Up and back. And again, that's going to help you to maintain the ascending angle of the club into the ball. It's going to help us get that high launch, help us reduce the spin, the two keys that I talked about in the introductory part of this video. So again, that's just a little extra sensation that you can work on. Now, how do we do this? How do we get all this happening in one swing? Now, if you go over to my website, www.vanphillips.co.uk, there's some great videos on there, over 60 videos in fact, on all aspects of the game, some great psychology videos in there as well. But I talk in there about the golf swing, and I talk about always practicing your swing in its entirety. I'm not a believer in breaking things down into positions, because that's not what you're going to do when you walk on a golf course, okay? And if you spend hours working on dots, okay, joining dots from there, joining another dot to there, that is not going to help you make that fluid move when you walk to the tee with a card in your hand. So how do we do that? I've given you all these different phases. How can you practice them together? Well, what you have to do, and I'm getting into here a little bit of psychology, effective practice psychology, is you've got to pick each stage. So there's 4 stages we've gone through here, obviously setup, backswing, transition and through swing feels, and you've just got to pick one at a time. Okay, so obviously the setup, we can do that on every shot. We're going to make sure we get the ball opposite the lead peck, all the things I went through there, and then I want you to count out 5 golf balls, and I want you to just hit those 5 balls, only focusing on the pivot in the backswing. So you're going to put your awareness in staying centered. You're going to observe whether you feel the lead shoulder moving slightly down under the chin, and you're only going to focus on those things for 5 balls. Okay, doesn't matter where they go, you're focusing your attention on the takeaway and backswing. Okay, 5 really focused observations. Okay, then you're going to count another 5 balls, and this time you're going to have some awareness of the takeaway, but you're going to have 95% focused on the transition. So you're going to be really observing, can I feel my rear elbow driving? Can I feel that spring of the pelvis away from the target? How does that feel? You're going to ask yourself these questions and really channel the mind into that one area. Okay, then you're going to count another 5 balls, and you're going to only observe the feeling of the lead shoulder snapping up and away through impact. You're going to put all of your focus into that area, but all the time making one fluid attempt to hit the ball. Okay, you're never going to feel like you're breaking the swing down. You're just putting your attention into different areas, but always while making one continuous swing. Okay, so head over to my website. There's lots of information on the fundamentals of a swing there that you'll find interesting, and check me out on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video.